The storm had a voice that night, a deep, endless howl that swallowed all things human. Elias staggered through the blizzard, his breath crystallizing instantly, the faint pulse of his biosuit flickering like a dying heartbeat. The sensors on his wrist projected faint holographic ripples, searching for shelter, for warmth, for anything that wasn't frozen death. But the only thing the scanner found was movement, small, faint, erratic, somewhere ahead, beneath the ice. He hesitated, wind battering his faceplate, then forced himself forward. The storm was beyond Category 9 now, even the survival pods on Karen 4's poles weren't built for this. The ice had teeth, and it wanted him buried. When he reached the ridge, he saw it, a collapsed nest. Shattered crystal shells scattered like broken glass, and beneath them, tiny bodies shivered. They looked almost metallic, their scales shimmering faintly beneath the snow, each exhaling a fragile mist. Hatchlings. Dragon hatchlings. Elias froze, his mind rejecting the sight. Dragons were myth even here, cold world titans that ruled the stratosphere, not newborns dying in the snow. He checked his thermal gauge, his suit was losing integrity fast. He could barely save himself, let alone them. But when one of the hatchlings lifted its head weakly, its eyes, bright as molten silver, locked onto his. The look wasn't animal. It was pleading. He swore under his breath and dropped to his knees. His gloves clamped open his survival pack. No shelter foam left, just one heat coil. Not enough. He tore open his coat, ignoring the chill that stabbed his lungs, and gathered the hatchlings close, pressing them against his chest armor. Their scales were like cold coins against his skin, but their heartbeats, tiny, fluttering, desperate, ignited something raw inside him. The storm screamed louder, drowning out thought. His AI assistant whispered static warnings about hypothermia, metabolic collapse, but he muted it. He whispered instead to the creatures in his arms. Not tonight. You hear me? Not tonight. Hours passed, or maybe eternity. His vision blurred. Somewhere deep in the snow, a pulse of warmth spread outward from his chest. His breath slowed, but the hatchling stirred, one nuzzling beneath his chin, another pressing a clawed hand over his heartplate. A soft glow spread from their scales, threads of light weaving through the air like living code. His neural implant flared, registering energy readings off every scale. For a moment, his thoughts weren't his own, he saw fragments of memory that weren't human, soaring through red clouds, tasting electricity, feeling the hum of the planet's magnetic core. The hatchling's minds brushed his like curious sparks. When morning came, the storm was gone. Elias lay half buried in snow, his coat stiff with frost. But the hatchlings were alive, clustered tightly around him, their scales now pulsing with slow, steady light. They were warm. Warm enough that the snow melted in a ring around them. Elias stared, disbelief giving way to awe. His vitals blinked weakly, his fingers numb, but he smiled anyway. Against all logic, against all natural order, he had survived, and so had they. The wind carried no sound now, only a faint hum, as if the world itself was waiting for what would happen next. The hatchlings followed him now, their tiny claws clicking softly against the frozen metal of his boots as he trudged through the wasteland. Elias had repaired his visor enough to read atmospheric data again, oxygen density dangerously low, temperatures below survival range, but the strange warmth radiating from the creatures seemed to defy the planet's physics. They moved like small comets, their scales flickering with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. When one of them, the smallest, brushed against his leg, his neural implant sparked, a soft whisper at the edge of consciousness, not in words but in emotion. Gratitude. Trust. He blinked the connection away, unsettled. It shouldn't be possible. By nightfall, the storm returned, smaller this time, a ghost of the first one. Elias took refuge in the wreckage of an old transport shuttle buried in ice. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. He scanned the hatchlings one by one, vital signs beyond stable, energy emissions climbing exponentially. Their bodies were absorbing ambient cold and converting it into biothermal energy. He had read about dragons in the old research archives, but nothing described this level of adaptation. "You're rewriting the laws of heat exchange," he muttered. The largest hatchling, with fractured cerulean scales, tilted its head as if listening. Elias stared back. "You understand me, don't you?" Before he could question his sanity further, the comms array of the shuttle crackled to life. A distorted signal cut through the static, unregistered human presence detected near Sector Theta 12. Multiple unidentified life signatures. Deploying reconnaissance units. The words froze his blood. He wasn't alone out here. The orbital patrols had scanned him. He looked at the hatchlings, they had drawn attention he couldn't afford. Through the cracked window, faint blue lights blinked on the horizon, drones. He shut down all electronics, heart pounding, and whispered, "Stay quiet." The hatchlings didn't move, but their scales dimmed, their glow fading until they looked like pieces of cold metal. Outside, the drones descended, slicing the air with sharp beams. Elias could hear the hum of their grav engines, smell the static in the air. One beam passed directly across his faceplate, but the hatchlings pressed close, their warmth masking his biosignature. The drones hovered, scanned, then turned away. The silence that followed felt like the breath of a living planet. When the threat passed, Elias slumped against the metal wall. One of the hatchlings climbed onto his arm, its wings unfolding for the first time, thin, translucent, veined with light. It looked at him, and he felt a pulse inside his skull. This time, the emotion was clear, belonging. Connection. Then, faintly, a word took shape in his mind. Elias. He froze. None of the dragons in recorded history had ever spoken through direct neural resonance. He touched its forehead with a trembling hand. "Who taught you that?" he whispered. The hatchling only stared, silver eyes reflecting the faint glimmer of distant stars. Outside, the ice plains shifted, and somewhere beyond the horizon, an ancient roar rolled through the storm, low, thunderous, alive. Elias knew then that something vast had felt the bond he'd created. The frozen world was waking up. The roar echoed across the frozen valleys, deep enough to rattle the hull of the crashed shuttle. The hatchlings stirred uneasily, their scales flickering between shades of blue and silver. Elias crouched near the shattered viewport, scanning the horizon with his wrist display, but the sensors returned nothing except static. The interference wasn't natural, it carried a rhythm, a pulse like language buried inside magnetic noise. He ran a decoding subroutine through his neural implant, isolating the pattern. It wasn't random. It was a call. The largest hatchling, Kale, as Elias had started calling him, lifted his head, nostrils flaring. A low hum spread through the air, vibrating against the walls of the wreck. Suddenly, the ice outside cracked in a perfect circle around the shuttle, glowing from beneath. Elias stepped back, instinct tightening his gut. "No, no, no," he muttered. Then the surface gave way. The entire wreck sank several meters into the ground before stabilizing on something smooth and metallic. Not natural ice. Structure. Buried beneath the tundra. He activated his visor's LiDAR and saw it, an enormous construct stretching far below, its architecture curving like the inside of a fossilized creature. The readings were ancient, predating any known human colony. He realized, with a chill deeper than cold, that they were standing atop a dragon relic. The dragons hadn't evolved on Karen 4. They'd built on it. Before he could process further, a tremor rippled through the ship. The hatchling shrieked, wings half-spreading. A surge of energy hit his neural link, raw, overwhelming emotion, fear, memory, recognition. They knew what was below. Elias staggered, clutching his head as flashes assaulted him, a towering creature of light and obsidian scales, cities suspended in storms, humans kneeling before flame-born monarchs. The link pulsed once more, sharper this time, and his implant went dark. A metallic voice filled the cabin. Human presence confirmed. Unauthorized. Initiating containment. A red beam swept through the air, followed by 3 hovering constructs. Sentinel drones unlike anything Elias had seen. They moved like living metal, their carapaces shifting with fractal precision. He grabbed his plasma cutter and shielded the hatchlings behind him. "Back off," he hissed. The drones ignored him, locking onto the young dragons. Kale's eyes flared silver. A burst of energy exploded outward, silent, invisible, yet it tore through the air like a storm. The drones froze mid-flight, their hulls frosting over before shattering into dust. Elias stared, breathless. His visor rebooted automatically, displaying unreadable energy signatures, frequencies off any human scale. When silence fell again, the ground beneath them trembled once more, but this time it wasn't collapsing, it was opening. From the ice rose a colossal shape, half buried in crystal and time. 2 eyes ignited in the dark, ancient, vast, aware. Elias stumbled backward as a voice older than any language resonated in his mind. "The bond has awakened. The covenant stirs once more." Asterisk. The hatchlings pressed close, trembling. Elias felt his pulse synchronize with theirs, 3 hearts in one beating rhythm. Above them, the storm broke into sheets of light, spiraling down like fire trapped in snow. Whatever he had started in that first night was no longer his to control. The dragons had felt it. And now, the world itself was responding. Elias stood frozen before the colossal form rising from beneath the ice. The ancient dragon's body was fused with machinery, segments of armor gleaming with faded circuitry, wings lined with metallic conduits instead of veins. Vapor hissed from joints like breathing steel. It wasn't a living being in the way the hatchlings were, it was an engine, an ancient fusion of biology and technology. Its eyes, twin spheres of molten gold, studied him through centuries of sleep. The hatchlings gathered around him, chirping softly, their scales pulsing in rhythm with the creature's glow. Elias could feel the resonance between them, a silent code written in frequencies his neural implant barely translated. The air was heavy with static, thick with the scent of ozone and burning frost. When the dragon spoke again, it wasn't with sound, it entered his mind like a current. Asterisk, human, bearer of warmth. You touched the unbound ones. Why? Asterisk. Elias wanted to answer, but his thoughts felt transparent. The creature saw everything, the night in the storm, the hatchlings clinging to him, the pulse of shared life. His words emerged ragged. Because they were dying. A rumble echoed deep within the earth. Asterisk, and by saving them, you woke the bloodline. The covenant cannot remain buried. Asterisk. Before Elias could question it, beams of light erupted from the surrounding tundra, shuttles descending through the storm. The insignia of the Orion Directorate glowed on their hulls. Human forces. They had traced his distress beacon after all. But something was wrong, the ships deployed armored figures with weapons calibrated to emit anti-draconic energy. Target all non-human entities, a voice barked over a loudspeaker. By order of the Directorate, eliminate contamination. Elias's stomach twisted. They think you're the threat, he whispered. The hatchlings hissed, scales flaring. The ancient dragon turned its head slowly, metal scraping against ice. Asterisk, so begins the old war again. Asterisk. The first plasma burst struck, tearing through the ground near them. Elias dove for cover, dragging the hatchlings behind fragments of frozen steel. The great dragon roared, and the sound shattered sky and ice alike. Its wings unfurled, and arcs of lightning cascaded outward, striking ships from the air like falling stars. Human soldiers screamed through static-filled comms. Elias's neural interface overloaded from the surge of power, the link between him and the hatchlings expanding into a storm of emotion, thought, instinct. He wasn't controlling them anymore, they were sharing him. For a moment, he saw through Kale's eyes, heat signatures of soldiers, their hearts flickering like embers. Through Sira's mind, he felt the rhythm of sound waves shaping plasma. The hatchlings moved in harmony, their energy amplifying the ancient dragon's power. The battlefield dissolved into a chaos of light and snow. When silence finally settled, only a few shuttles remained burning in the distance. The dragon lowered its massive head, eyes dimming. "The age of division is ending," it whispered. Elias, still trembling, realized that the war he'd just witnessed was only the opening act of something far larger. The Directorate would not stop. And now both species, human and dragon, would be forced to choose which side of the storm they belonged to. Night returned to the tundra, but the stars above no longer looked familiar. The storm had dispersed, revealing a sky streaked with artificial satellites and orbiting dreadnoughts, human fleets moving into position. Elias watched them from the fractured remains of the shuttle, feeling the faint pulse of his link with the hatchlings as if their hearts were beating within his own chest. The ancient dragon slumbered again beneath the ice, its colossal body recharging, drawing power from geothermal veins that glowed like arteries beneath the frozen crust. Elias had scavenged a data core from one of the downed Directorate ships. He wiped the frost from its surface and connected it to his wrist console. Lines of encrypted code spilled across his visor. Project designation, ECLYPSE, cognitive linkage between Homo sapiens and Draconis bioforms. His stomach twisted as he scrolled through the logs. The Directorate had known of dragons for decades. They hadn't feared them, they had created them. The dragons were bioengineered war organisms, designed from ancient genetic remnants recovered from a lost civilization. Their rebellion centuries ago had nearly wiped out their makers. Humanity had buried that truth, rewriting history to hide its failure. The hatchlings approached silently, their eyes gleaming. Kale placed his claw on the device, and a flood of images poured through the neural bond: laboratories, cages, fire. Elias gasped and tore the interface off. The hatchlings trembled, their scales shifting into darker hues. They remembered everything. He could feel their anger, their grief. Yet beneath it all, there was trust. He stood and faced them. "They'll come again," he said quietly. "With more ships, more soldiers. They'll destroy everything to cover what they did." Sira tilted her head, a soft pulse radiating from her scales. "Then we stop them," the thought voice whispered inside his skull. The ground shuddered. A low hum vibrated from deep beneath their feet, the ancient dragon awakening once more. Its voice returned, quieter now but carrying the weight of centuries. The human fleets gather. They do not understand that the bond cannot be broken by force. If one of you falls, the others will follow. Elias clenched his fists. "Then we fight together." The dragon's eyes blazed, mirroring the auroras streaking across the sky. "You misunderstand, human. You are no longer separate. The bond is evolving. You are us now." Pain seared through Elias's skull. His neural implant burned with feedback as the hatchling's consciousness merged more deeply into his. His vision fractured into streams of data, thermal readings, magnetic currents, the faint hum of living energy in every molecule. He was human and not, alive and infinite. The storm winds outside carried his breath, and the air itself responded to his will. Above, the first of the human dreadnoughts entered the atmosphere, streaks of plasma trailing behind them. Elias felt the hatchlings tighten their wings, ready. The dragon beneath the ice stirred like a waking god. The war for the truth of creation had begun, and Elias, once just a stranded traveler, now stood as the bridge between species, the living proof that what humanity feared most was the part of itself it had forgotten to love. The sky burned with streaks of light as the Directorate's fleet descended, their engines carving fire through the thin atmosphere. Elias stood atop the glacier's ridge, the hatchlings beside him, their bodies now twice the size they had been, wings shimmering with liquid light. The bond between them was no longer a connection but a shared existence. His pulse echoed in their veins, and their thoughts whispered through his mind like fragments of song. Below, the ice trembled as the ancient dragon rose, its mechanical wings unfurling with the roar of 1,000 storms. Human command frequencies filled his visor, demanding surrender. He ignored them. His neural implant interfaced directly with the dragon's biocircuitry, and for the first time, the patterns made sense. The relic beneath the tundra wasn't a weapon, it was a planetary stabilizer, a fusion of consciousness and atmosphere, designed to restore balance to a dying world. Humanity had once tried to control it. Now, it was waking to reclaim what was lost. Plasma rounds rained from the sky. The hatchlings leapt into the air, weaving through beams of light, their bodies trailing arcs of energy that shattered drones mid-flight. Elias felt every motion, every breath. He raised his hand instinctively, and the air itself bent around him, snow, light, and plasma converging in a blinding spiral. The ancient dragon's voice resonated within him. Asterisk, you are the bridge. Seal the fracture, or both species perish. Asterisk. He understood then. The storms that had ravaged Karen 4 weren't natural, they were the result of the broken covenant, a psychic rift between human and dragon consciousnesses, centuries unresolved. The bond he had formed in that frozen night was the key to closing it. But it would cost him everything. He turned to the hatchlings, Kale, Syrah, Morin, and smiled faintly. Stay with me. One last time. Their eyes glowed in answer. Together, they took flight into the heart of the storm, the auroras swirling like ribbons of fire around them. The energy built to a crescendo, his mind fracturing and expanding, merging with the dragons and the world itself. He saw every memory, the warmth he gave them, the fear he carried, the hope that had bound them all. Then he released it. The blast tore through the sky, silent and vast. The fleet halted mid-atmosphere, their weapons extinguished. The storm clouds dissolved, revealing sunlight that hadn't touched Karen 4 in generations. On the surface, ice melted into rivers of silver, and where Elias had stood, only a faint ring of light remained. The hatchlings landed quietly, their scales reflecting dawn. They looked skyward, feeling his presence ripple through the wind, no longer separate, no longer human or dragon, but both. Across the comms, stunned human voices whispered of peace signals coming from the Dragon Network, the first ever received. Far above, in the quiet void, a new constellation flickered into being, 4 stars aligned in a curve of flame and frost. And those who knew the story said that it was the mark of the traveler who gave warmth to dragons, and in doing so, taught 2 worlds how to breathe again.